the darkness strikes so hard, it's more than we can bear. We remember you. As we wake up with the sunrise, greet the brand new day, may we ever keep in mind your quiet wisdom and the way you humbly walk the talk, staying faithful and true. We remember you. Your dying leaves a gaping hole deep within our aching soul. Some days I wander around without a clue. I don't claim to understand, I don't see it as God's plan, how lightning sometimes strikes out of the blue. Foggy haze and the crashing storms of night, we remember you. Sowing seeds in springtime when the sky is glistening bright, we remember you. May the grandeur of the star fields always take my breath away. Like you on the potter's wheel, may I let myself be clay, being born and dying from the old into the new. We remember you, still trusting in the one who is making all things new. We remember you.
There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my heart, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing in my mind, and it's telling me that
Good afternoon. I'm the Reverend Abhijan Amanchi, one of the ministers serving this religious community, Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist congregation. I welcome you all to this service of remembrance and celebration of life for Margaret Levchenko. If you're joining us online, please share in the chat your name and where you're joining us from today. And if this is your first time attending a Unitarian Universalist congregation, we just want you to know that this is how we roll. You know, this is industrial chic, and this is kind of a rustic setting, right, Gail? And how we have our congregations. No, just kidding. We're going through a major renovation here, have been for months and will be for a few months more. And but we wanted to have the service here, a place that was beloved to Andy and Margaret for so many years. So we're glad you're here. And Unitarian Universalist tradition is part of the congregational Protestant lineage of Christian congregations. But more than a century ago, we decided that we would rather build our religious community on the promises we make with one another about how we respect and treat each other, rather than on uniformity and conformity of belief. So as a non-creedal religious community, we honor religious wisdom and spiritual truths wherever we find it, in the great religious and sacred traditions of the world, in our own hearts and nature, in science and literature. And so when we grieve, we use our memorial services as occasions to celebrate the life of our loved ones, rather than as an occasion for a proclamation of faith. We honor the fact that each of us here has brought our own spiritual understandings of the mystery of life and death, and will find consolation in those understandings as we work our way through our loss. So this afternoon, through words and stories, music and song, we will weave together the life of Margaret Levchenko, knowing that the fullness of her life cannot be fully captured in 1 hour. 1 hour. In doing so, we will celebrate the life that Margaret lived, the loves that she cherished, the values that she stood for, and the communities she helped build and sustain. And in this way, we hope to inspire each one of us to do the same. So our best gift to one another today, and our best tribute to Margaret, both now and in the future, is to hold her in our hearts and memories as completely as possible, and through our memories, our stories, and our love, to give her back to one another again and again. So as we enter this space made sacred by our presence and the presence of the Holy, that is known by many names, in which we live, move, breathe, and have our being, let us invoke the Spirit of life and love to be with us in this hour as we come together to give thanks for all that is the life of Margaret Levchenko. Welcome. As is the custom in our faith tradition, we open this sacred time with the lighting of the chalice. Today, this is the flame of memory and hope that we carry within us as we honor Margaret. We acknowledge that a human life is sacred in its beginning and its end. So as Margaret's grandsons, Justin and Keith, kindle the memorial flame, I invite you to speak the chalice lighting words that are printed in your order of service in unison. Please rise in body and or in spirit. Let us say, we light this chalice and in tribute to the love a single life can inspire. May the chalice remind us of the extravagant gift of life. May it signify the community we create in our being together and our sharing together. Please remain rising to sing hymn number 38, Morning Has Broken. The details of a person's life journey can never encompass the many meanings of that life, but the details are a good place to begin. Margaret Moore Levchenko was born in East Rockaway, New York on April 30th, 1926, to William Martin Moore and Roberta Sly Moore. She was the youngest of 5 children. When she was 7, Margaret lost her mother to cancer. Their house burned down, and her father, an attorney, lost his job during the Great Depression. Margaret made it through that very hard time in her life with the support of her older siblings and her maternal uncle, John Moore. After her sophomore year in high school, Margaret and her father moved to Sussex, New Jersey, to live with her uncle John. And after graduating from Sussex High School, she attended Montclair State, where she excelled in academics and sports, playing basketball, leading the sports association, and serving in student government. I just had this image of Margaret doing a three-pointer, Wow. After graduating, Margaret spent a year teaching in Washington State and then returned to her favorite city, New York, where she spent several years working administrative jobs and attending graduate school. Now, Margaret still holds the record in the Moore family with the most master's degrees, 3 of them. One in teaching from Hunter's College, another in Russian studies from Columbia, and one in library science from the University of Maryland. Now, Margaret met Andrew Levchenko, Andy, in class at Columbia. Andy asked her out for a cup of coffee, and 3 weeks later he proposed, asking her to marry him. Right, Phil? Yep. And they were married a few months later on September 22nd, 1956. And shortly thereafter, Andy and Margaret moved to the D.C. area as Andy had been recruited to work at the CIA. Andy Margaret and the family lived overseas for a few years in England from 1963 to 67, and later in Okinawa, Japan, from 69 to 71. In the 1970s, after they returned back to the States, Margaret decided to rejoin the workforce. And so after getting her master's in library science, she began working part-time for the Montgomery County Library System. She worked for 20 years at the Wheaton Library until her retirement in 1994. And after retiring, Margaret went into high gear. She started volunteering as a mentor with Interages for 19 years at Eastern Middle School in Silver Spring. In 2013, she was honored as the Co-Volunteer of the Year by the Jewish Council on Aging. Margaret and Andy joined Cedar Lane in the early 60s and became actively involved in the many programs and activities of the congregation. She was active in the Alliance. She helped organize our library, which is where we will be having the reception after the service, and she assisted with the jewelry sale for many years. She had a wonderful eye for jewelry and had a way of picking out some nice items when especially my wife was interested in them. Margaret was an avid reader, a golfer, a bridge player. She played bridge all along, up until very recently. A traveler and lover of the arts. She and Andy enjoyed their many trips to Australia, Peru, the erstwhile Soviet Union, and Alaska. They enjoyed attending classical musical concerts at Strathmore, plays at the Olney Theatre, reading biographies, and playing tennis, a love that they imparted to their 3 sons. Margaret and Andy spent 66 years in love with each other until Andy's death on March 29, 2022. Margaret died peacefully in her sleep on August 14, 2023. She was 97. She's survived by their beloved sons, Phil Andrews, his wife Stacy, and their son Justin, Stuart and his wife Belen, by Stuart's former wife Aurora and their sons Paul and Derek, and Keith, his wife Nicolette, and their children Kara, Juliet, and Nicholas. Her many nephews and nieces, and her many, many friends here at Cedar Lane. We miss Margaret Levchenko. And now I'd like to welcome family and friends to come forth and offer some brief reflections and memories. We try.
Raise this up a little bit. God, I got to follow that up. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Nick Levchenko. I'm Keith and Nicolette's son. Grandma was an amazing person, and living all the way to 97 is just crazy. She was always so sweet and caring to everybody. Like, if you did something wrong, it was definitely on you. It was definitely your fault, because she would very rarely yell. It was always cool hearing about her life, as Abi just mentioned. She grew up during the Depression, so it was crazy how much she went through. In short, she was kind of a badass. Aside from that, though, hearing about her hobbies, like how she played basketball, I didn't find that out until like a few years ago. It was crazy to think about her shooting three-pointers. I thought it was, it shows that there was always something new about Grandma I learned every day. Bringing it more to the present, it was amazing how even in her mid-90s, she still kicked butt in bridge, like we mentioned, and how she did not use a walker until the last year of her life. Yeah. Another noteworthy thing is she made this fantastic chocolate pudding cake. Yeah. My dad tried to replicate it, but he kind of failed. It was still good, but she had her own kind of pizzazz to it. It was still good, but she had this own grandma pizzazz to it that could not be replicated. I also would like to mention a story about how when I was little, my grandparents had a bowl of applesauce on our table for dinner, and I thought it was for me, and I ate the whole thing. And my grandpa said, "Where's the applesauce?" Now, I mentioned this story for Grandpa's celebration of life, but I bring it up again because during this summer, I had a bunch of applesauce next to my plate, and Grandma took some from me, just naturally. And I like to think she kind of unintentionally avenged Grandpa. The last thing I want to say is that the last time I saw Grandma was about a week before she passed. I was playing Mexican train dominoes with my uncle and cousin and aunt. And despite her being definitely a little confused during it, she understood it and enjoyed it. And I think she even won a round, right? Yeah. Yeah. And we were like, Grandma, you won. And she was like, oh. So yeah, may you rest in peace with Grandpa and all your other family members. I love you, Grandma.
It's about the right height. So I'm Derek. It's my brother Paul. We are Stewart's sons. So growing up in LA, I usually saw my grandma during the holidays. So I think I associated her with vacations and Christmas. Christmas was especially fitting because she was the sweetest person I knew. I remember when I was little, I used to help her with the Sunday crosswords, but looking back, I think she may have been giving me some really obvious clues. She also taught me how to play Sudoku, hearts, and spades, so that's where I get my affinity for puzzles and card games. I wish I got to spend more time with her as an adult, but I'll always cherish my memories with her as a child.
I get to lower this because I'm shorter than all of them. Hi, everyone. I'm Paul Levchenko. I'm Margaret's grandson. Like my brother Derek, I spent the last couple weeks recounting some of my memories with my grandma and thinking about what they meant to me. One of those things I remember was, I think I was 5 or 6, and I had her orange cake for the first time, and I had a bit of a sweet tooth back then, and so it was a big deal for me, and I loved it. And every time we were lucky enough to make the trip out to the East Coast here, out to Maryland, and visit, she loved making it for us. She also constantly asked me what books I was reading in school or for fun, and she really always emphasized how important it was to read them. And whenever I'd wake up and head downstairs, I always remember NPR was on, and she was always solving the daily crossword. I also remember that when things got a little too heated at the table during our ritual Uno games, she was always the one to bring everyone back together. I really like to think that she was kind of the glue in our family. Reflecting on all these, they really tell me what she was about. She was about loving her family, and she was about making sure that they were becoming the best versions of themselves. Thank you, Grandma.
Hi, my name's Rick Moore. I was Margaret's godson and nephew, and I'm a professor, and that's what the Reverend is worried about. I think I'm the only person here who attended Margaret and Andy's wedding. I was a toddler. And I'm not sure I actually remember it, but my father had made an 8mm film of Andy and Peach walking down the steps of the chapel at Columbia University, and she was wearing a stunning rich green dress. She looked great, and so I remember it vividly, whether I remember it or not. I knew Peach for 70 years. We call her Peach because that was her family nickname, and I got it from my dad, and I know his other siblings passed it on to their children as well, and I passed it on to my children. No one else calls her Peach, and every time I would see her and call her Peach, she would just get this big smile on her face because we were the last keepers of that nickname. My other memory of Peach from when I was little is I was a preschooler and we went to a party at her and Andy's apartment way uptown in Manhattan. And I was allowed to eat all the pretzels I wanted, and to keep me happy, she opened the window in the apartment where you could crawl out onto the fire escape and watch the city go by. And I knew right then she was the coolest aunt I had, because this would not be allowed any other place. Peach was my godmother, and she never forgot a birthday. She never forgot an anniversary. She showed up for all events, if at all physically possible. She had a rough start, as the Reverend said, to her life. She lost her mom. She lost her house. She and her dad had to go live with relatives in New Jersey. And she threw a lot of energy and passion into creating the family that she wanted. And we were all included in that. If you were passing through Washington and you let her know, you had to come over for dinner, and she would gather every relative within driving distance to her house. Cousin Mike and Helen, Phil and Stacy, Keith and Nicolette, Susan and Charlie, any of their children who could be roped in, had to be there. When I got married, she welcomed my wife into the family with the same warmth. My daughter Madeline came out and stayed for 2 summers to work on Phil's campaign with Peach and Andy and got her start in politics. My daughter Stephanie went to law school at University of Virginia and had her first Thanksgiving away from our family with Peach and Andy. Peach was a woman ahead of her time. I admired her so much when I was a teenager because she had an adventurous life. She had lived overseas with Andy. She had been a single woman in New York. She had worked in publishing. She'd gone to an Ivy League graduate school. All these things seemed far beyond my grasp at that time, and so it served as a role model for me. When I was a college student, Peach loved to talk about the issues of the day, and she was very tolerant of the behavior of the baby boom generation, which I won't digress into. But she did archly observe one day, Rick, baby boomers did not invent sex. And I was too modest to probe into what she meant by that. But it stayed with me that might be possible, but I wasn't sure. On one of Peach's last visits to the West Coast, she was nearing 90, and we had an outing with my daughter Madeline, my wife Yvonne, to the Los Angeles County Museum of Art to see a James Turrell exhibit. Now, if you don't know James Turrell, he's an artist who does not work in anything but light. So you go into these vast spaces, and there's all these weird light. I don't know how else to explain it. It's very interesting, and some people find it sort of disorienting. It's really not for the casual museum goer. She loved it. She talked about it all the way home. She enjoyed it so much. And so that's how I'm always going to remember Aunt Peach: cheerful, curious, engaged with life, happy to be with family, and looking forward to the next thing.
I'm Sue Mathias, and I'm here to talk about, thank you. I'm Sue Mathias, and I'm here to talk about Margaret and bridge. We belong to a bridge group. I have 2 other people from the group here, Jane Cheever and Marie Powell. This group was started when our children were in preschool. And then after they got out of preschool, the progress was everybody went back to school to get an advanced degree. Then they got a job. Then they retired. And then they traveled. And we were finally able to meet once a week. But you can imagine how much we knew about each other's children, but we didn't know the children, because they were never home when we were playing bridge. Margaret was a terrific bridge player. She would take risks that we were always startled at, but she would almost always win. Margaret and I also shared the profession of librarianship, and it was kind of interesting to be able to talk to somebody who was working at the same job, and both of us loved our jobs. We have known Margaret for a very, very long time, and we will miss her.
Hello, I'm Juliet, granddaughter. I'm just going to read a short poem. This is On the Death of the Beloved by John O'Donohue. Though we need to weep your loss, you dwell in that safe place in our hearts, where no storm or night or pain can reach you. Let us not look for you only in memory, where we would grow lonely without you. You would want us to find you in presence, beside us when beauty brightens, when kindness glows and music echoes eternal tones. Thanks.
Is it on? Maybe? Yeah, okay. Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, and the dreams that you dream of once in a lullaby. Oh, somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly, and the dreams that you dream of, dreams really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where trouble melts like lemon drops high above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. Oh, somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds fly, and the dreams that you dare to wipe, and oh, why can't I see trees of green and red roses too. I'll watch them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the brightness of day. Well, I like the night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies crying, I watch them grow. They'll learn much more than we'll ever know, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Someday I'll wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind me, drops like lemon drops high above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. Oh, somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, and the dreams that you dare to fight, then no, I can't hide. Ooh.
Second year in a row I had to follow that song, or the singer. Hi, I'm Keith. I'm Mom's youngest son. As you've heard, Mom was a very kind person with a strong personality who had a very full life. I think her upbringing during the Depression, as you heard, gave her a perseverance that she would carry forward for the rest of her life. She took challenges and difficulties in stride and almost never complained about anything. And how shall we say, she had a bit of a frugal streak. I remember back in the mid-'70s, she would blend a gallon of milk with that awful freeze-dried Carnation instant dry milk to make the milk last longer. But for good reason. She had 3 sons wolfing down pounds of cereal every day, not to mention our giant glasses of milk we had at dinner every night. Mom was also an early adopter of bulk purchasing and freezing large packages of ground beef. She would have loved Costco back in the day. I cherish the memories of growing up with our family dinners, which, spearheaded by Mom, often turned into deep dives into the latest political issue of the day, as well as our after-dinner family time playing card games. She was an expert at all card games, as you've probably guessed by now, and usually won. We also had some TV viewing time. She was not the biggest fan of TV, but she had her moments. Back when there were only 5 channels, though, on a tiny black and white TV at first, very, very tiny TV. And finally, eventually, we got to a whopping 19-inch color TV. She was not a huge fan of TV, as I said. She preferred books. As a librarian, you would expect that. But she did love certain shows. The TV lineup I best remember, as some of you may remember, was John Chancellor on NBC Nightly News, followed by MASH reruns, and topped off by the great Carol Burnett Show. Her nieces and nephews, as you heard, called her Aunt Peach. Now, I grew up thinking it was because she loved peaches. I remember many trips up county as a kid with Mom picking her own fresh peaches right off the tree to eat that night with ice cream, or as ingredients for her amazing peach pie. However, I later found out, as you heard from Rick, her nickname went way back and came about because everyone thought she was as sweet as a peach, a common expression in the early 20th century onward. While Aunt Libby, her oldest sister, took on the family genealogy research, later picked up so ably by her son, Bill, Mom was the most diligent of the Moore children in making sure everyone stayed in touch, as you heard. She organized family reunions and regularly wrote letters and later emails and Facebook posts to everyone. She loved being a grandmother and enjoyed being a part of each of her 6 grandchildren's lives and seeing them all become young adults. Mom was politically active well before emails and the World Wide Web came around in the 1990s, but with these new tools, her research accelerated. I recall her printing out articles advocating for various causes and leaving stacks of these by the front door for Phil and me to take home after family dinners. Stu was spared as he was 2,700 miles away in Redondo Beach. Yes, Mom loved to print the internet. My father was many things, but cook was not one of them. But he was a smart guy, and he married a good cook. Mom made some excellent meals I can still picture in my head today. Her meatloaf was my brother Stu's favorite dinner as a kid. She made an excellent fried rice, an amazing sausage casserole, and a great Johnny Marzetti casserole, which we usually just called Johnny. Mom was also a great baker and made so many birthday cakes over decades. My personal fave growing up was her Boston cream pie, and you heard about her chocolate pudding cake and her orange cake. Mom tried to stay current with the times, and she did her best to drag Dad out of his basement workshop bayonet museum sanctuary whenever she could. I recall in the early 80s being horrified to learn that Mom and Dad were taking disco dance lessons and seeing them practicing in the living room. Sorry, that is an image you just can't unsee. I didn't have the heart to tell them that disco was well past its peak at that point. But in retrospect, I see the whole thing much more positively now. It is an example of Mom being open to new things, getting out of her comfort zone, and with the force of her personality, pushing Dad out of his as well. Also, doing the math, I realized that at the time, she was younger than I am now. Oof. Mom, I will miss you your very large, strong, and loving presence. You created a sustained and wonderful and loving family home life for us. You fostered and modeled for us a curiosity and thirst for life. Thanks.
I want to thank everyone for coming out to honor Mom's memory. She was a very, very special lady, not just my mother, but she meant a lot to a lot of people. It was Monday evening, August 14th. I was driving with Belen sitting next to me from our home in the South Bay of Los Angeles to our getaway home in Palm Springs. We were already on the freeway, but we hadn't gone very far when I got a call from Brother Phil. I took the call because I knew it was about Mom. I had a real foreboding since Mom had severely injured her hip recently and was hospitalized. Brother Keith was also on the line. They broke the news to me that Mom, wonderful and beloved by all, had died that evening. It hit me like a sucker punch to my soul. I started crying and sobbing and weeping through LA freeway traffic. Driving while sobbing, I don't recommend it. Belen said, "Oh, baby," and started to comfort me in her loving way. I stayed on the phone with Phil and Keith for another 12 minutes, crying and weeping the whole way. Belen said to me, "Let me drive. You're weaving through traffic and we're still 100 miles away from Palm Springs." I realized Belen's deep concern was turning into total panic by the fact that I was driving the way I was. Belen even put her hand on the steering wheel to stabilize the ship. After about 10 miles somewhere in Long Beach, I wisely pulled over and let Belen take the wheel, saving both of our lives in the process. Let me tell you who Mom was. As a child, Mom had her ass kicked on a daily basis by life. When Mom, as the minister mentioned, when Mom was about 6 or 7, her 39-year-old mother, Roberta Sly Moore, died of cancer. She left behind 5 children, with Mom being the youngest. Her sister, my beloved Aunt Ellie, all of 12 years old, became her surrogate mother. God bless my Aunt Ellie and her memory. A few years later, the family home burned to the ground. Then her father, William Moore, my grandfather, lost his job due to the Great Depression. After all this and the death of his young wife, the house burning down, and the loss of his job and all income, with 5 kids to support, my grandfather fell into a deep depression. He mentally checked out and became a non-functioning alcoholic. His brother, my saintly great uncle John, became her surrogate father in Sussex, New Jersey. These brutal early life experiences had a profound impact on my mother. It shaped the wonderful person and empathetic person she became. These experiences turned Mom into a caring, empathetic young adult who always rooted for the underdog and those less fortunate. Mom also possessed a tough New York, matter-of-fact soul. I'm proud to say Mom didn't have a fake bone in her body, and she was incapable of bullshit. This had a profound impact on me, my personality, and the man I became. A lot of my bluntness comes from her. She had her ass kicked by tough times throughout her childhood, and she did not have time for false bullshit. Interesting, Mom grew up as a huge fan of a young Frank Sinatra in 1942. When Mom was 16, she was one of the original Bobby Soxers, a term used to describe Frank's early fanatical fans. In Sinatra's later years, every time we would see him on TV, Mom would say to me, "Oh, there's old Blue Eyes." Two of Mom's passions were golf and bridge, and she also loved books, as that was mentioned earlier, but God, she loved books. Mom was a lifetime golfer, and she loved to socialize with her friends while playing hours and hours of bridge. Who Mom influenced? For 19 years, Mom was a mentor from Montgomery County Public Schools for students from Africa, immigrant children from Africa. The first child she mentored 25 years ago was Jordan Bondo, who was 10 years old at the time. Jordan Facebooked me years later because he recognized the Levchenko name and asked if she was my mother. I was proud to say, yes, she is. When I informed Jordan of Mom's passing, he wrote these kind words of condolence. "Hey, Stuart, oh, wow, I'm so sorry to hear this. Mrs. Levchenko was such an amazing person. She introduced me to many board and card games. Our favorite was Go Fish. I found it amusing saying Go Fish back in the 5th grade as I barely spoke any English. And it was an easy phrase to remember due to it being repeated throughout the game. She was so kind that I signed up for the same program the following year when I got to middle school. I got to spend even more time with her. Know that I'll be thinking of her. I can say that she influenced my love for community, my love for Tacoma Park. As a matter of fact, I'll be starting a job this year as a crossing guard for the little ones. My little way of doing something community-based like her. Once again, very sorry for your family loss. Sending you lots of love and prayers, Jordan Bondo." In November 1977, I lost my beloved Baba, my Russian grandmother, who died suddenly. I was devastated. Baba was living with us. She had moved in a few months prior. So one day she told me she had chest pains. I told Mom and Dad about it, and they took her to Holy Cross Hospital. Baba never came home. She died at the hospital. I was completely floored. After Mom told me the horrible news, I cried in her arms for an extended period of time. Mom held me close and offered great comfort to me. It was the first time I had such a direct experience with death. Christmas. Mom and Dad didn't make a fuss about too many things, but they did make a big deal about Christmas. Christmas Eve, they would place some Christmas presents under the tree. By Christmas morning, the number of presents had multiplied. As a young boy, I found this to be very exciting. Therefore, my memories of Christmas with Mom and Dad are vivid and happy ones. I suspect that they were making up for what they missed out on as children. Mom and Dad, what a couple they were. Every day they were like a comedy team. Every day around Mom and Dad was like a situational comedy. Dad was a super cool secret agent man for the CIA, but a dork around the house. Very goofy and very cool, a fascinating dichotomy he was. Growing up in the late 60s through the late 70s, we took many family trips from our home in Kensington, Maryland, to Morristown, New Jersey, to visit my beloved grandmother, Baba, and my dad's much older sister by 19 years, my Aunt Jane, who was a famous children's author. It's supposed to take 3 hours and 45 minutes to get there from Kensington to Morristown. I asked Alexa about that, and that's what she told me. But the way that Dad drove and the way Mom navigated, this 3 hour and 45 minute trip became a 6 hour epic journey. No matter how many times we'd driven there, at some point Dad was going to misunderstand Mom's directions and take the wrong exit. That and the fact that they like to drive in the slow lane and never pass anyone greatly extended the trip. Because of Mom and Dad's tough upbringing, it made them want to live modestly and well below their means. Mom and Dad always preferred cheap cars. I don't know if you guys remember, back in the 70s, traveling in a cheap car meant traveling in extreme discomfort due to the hard plastic vinyl seats. And Phil, Keith, and I used to fight over, who got to sit in the middle. I mean, we didn't want to sit in the middle. That was the worst. It was always a hump in the middle of the car. It was the worst. It was like sitting on an uneven cement sidewalk. So we almost have fistfights over that. Anyway, and you have good luck with all that on a 6 hour trip, huh? One of the cars we had was so cheap, as soon as you drove 60 miles an hour, the wheel would start to shake. That Ford Fairmont was the first car I learned to drive at age 16. Later in life, though, they saw the light and they started driving nicer cars like Volvo and Prius. Dad loved Mom so much, he was always head over heels in love with her. In their late middle age and later years, I would often see Dad gazing at Mom with a puppy dog look on his face. 80 years old doing this, it was, later I found myself gazing at Belen the same way. My father like son, huh? It meant a lot to me the way Mom and Dad took Belen into their home and treated her like the daughter they never had. On the last evening of her life, while she lay in her bed, she had decided she was ready to go. Mom was ready for the next journey. I wasn't ready to let go of her, but she was ready to join Dad. I believe on that evening, a light shone down on Mom, and Dad reached out to her and beckoned to her to join him, saying, "Margaret, you're the only woman I've ever loved, and I want to spend eternity with you. I love you, Mom."
Hi, I'm Phil, Mom's oldest son. On behalf of the family, I want to thank Avi and the wonderful staff here, Michael McCrickard and Dr. Jasmine Lee and Lynn Peters for their assistance with this wonderful ceremony. Thank you. And thank you all for coming. My mom would be very impressed that you made it out on this very bad weather day. Any day that you couldn't play golf was by definition a bad weather day. My mom liked conciseness. And the long and short of it is this: my mom made everyone around her better by her words, by her demeanor, and by her actions. And no one shaped me more than my mom. Mom had clear values and beliefs. High among them were respecting legitimate authority, and her authority was always legitimate. Following the rules and being polite. As a young student, the worst offense I could imagine was being sent to the principal's office and my mom being called in. Mom was a strong believer in the value of work, and although she strongly opposed child labor, she liked that I entered the workforce at 11 as a newspaper carrier for the Stars and Stripes in Okinawa, and then later back in the States as a carrier for the Washington Post, which my two brothers did as well. Mom was pleased that the family was doing its part to get the word out about the Watergate scandal to our neighbors. At my mom's doing, when I turned 18, I was given a membership in Common Cause, the Good Government Reform Group, like most young people. Right? Right? Didn't you? No? I was the only one? Mom was delighted that 10 years later I was hired as the executive director of Common Cause Maryland and moved back to Maryland. I'm sure Mom rolled her eyes more than a few times, but she strongly supported all of my many political campaigns and was delighted when I finally won on my fourth try. She had a lot to do with it. She coordinated the project that generated thousands of letters from neighbors to neighbors, and she also stuffed thousands of envelopes. Fortunately for all of us, the thousands of paper cuts she received during that time didn't affect her longevity. Like other more family members, Mom believed that ice cream was one of the world's greatest inventions. Freezers were a close second. She always had it in the house. I have followed this practice with great enthusiasm for decades. It may be the one area where I've trumped her. You've heard or know that Mom loved hosting family and friends and classical music, a good book, golf, bridge, traveling around the world, and spending time with Andy. However, since Mom was quite stoic, less was known about what she didn't like. But here are some things. Richard Nixon. She never trusted him, and her instincts proved correct. Wasting money. My freshman year at Bucknell, I received a blistering letter from my mom telling me to shape up or ship out after she and my dad were notified that my midterm grade in art was very low. Although she didn't know that art history was a very difficult class, she was correct that I could work much harder, which I did. Wasting food. For my mom, who grew up during the Great Depression, this was a sin. When she served lima beans, I had to sweep them from my plate to the napkin on my lap very stealthily. Long phone calls, especially long-distance ones. A typical conversation went like this. Hi, sweetheart. How's everyone? Good to hear everyone's well. Nice to hear from you. Click. Mom never forgot that in the 1970s it cost $6 in current dollars for a 5-minute long-distance call. She didn't like gas above 39 cents a gallon either. Mom never forgot the price of gas in the early 1970s and would not accept any explanations for price inflation. And curse words. Yet another reason Mom didn't like Richard Nixon and was appalled by the Watergate tapes. My mom was a committed Unitarian and much enjoyed her many decades at Cedar Lane. She wrote the following nearly 30 years ago. I am a Unitarian because it is a religion concerned primarily with helping one to live a good life, a life that is ethical, useful, moral, and joyful. It is concerned with this life rather than an afterlife. The kingdom of God is life here and now. We should cherish it, improve it, and help others to share in its gifts. We must pass it on to our children in a better state than we received it. The spiritual aspects of life are found in love, loyalty, beauty, and in being part of a common humanity. I think we're all children of God and unique. Every individual should be treated with dignity and respect. Church is important to me as a way of sharing with others a commitment to this life. It is a place to go for ethical and spiritual direction, a place of solace and help in times of need, a meeting place to share hopes and concerns with others, and a place to feel part of a spiritual, ethical, and truth-seeking community. My mom's goodness went deep. I feel blessed that she was my mom.
I invite us now to come together in the spirit of prayer, meditation, or reflection. Nameless one of many names, and beyond all naming, Spirit of life and love, fall afresh on us today as we celebrate the life and mourn the loss of our dear departed friend and family member, Margaret Levchenko. We pray, as mourners of death and celebrants of life, we pray comfort for the hearts of those of us who knew and loved Margaret, knowing that the fire of her memory will inspire us to do good and just work in the world. Sweet mystery, we pray hope. Hope that we will always seek new and creative ways to honor the legacies of perseverance, confidence, intelligence, tenacity, faithfulness, and love left on this plane by our blessed ancestor, Margaret. And in community, we pray love, a love that will not let us go, let us down, or let us off the hook. In the name of all that is holy, life-affirming, and life-sustaining, we say, Amen.
All the money that e'er I had, I spent it in good company, and all the harm that e'er I've done, alas, it was to none but me. And all I've done for want of will to memory now I can't recall. So fill to me the parting glass. Good night and joy be with you all. Oh, all the comrades that e'er I've had are sorry for my going away, and all the sweethearts that e'er I've had would wish me one more day to stay. But since it falls unto my lot that I should rise and you should not, I'll gently rise and I'll softly call. Good night and joy be with you all. Good night and joy be with you all.
The poet Mary Oliver writes, "Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? The grasshopper, I mean the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Margaret lived her one wild and precious life fully, beautifully, widely and deeply and with joy, and shared of her life so fully with unconditional love and care and a devotion to her family, to her friends, to her faith, and to this community for so many years. Did it not because she was looking for recognition or accolades or awards. No, it was the way she wanted to live this one life she had been given. I loved that piece you shared, Phil, about why she is a Unitarian Universalist. And that belief in life before death, this life, and living that fully. She embodied that in so many ways that blessed all of us, that we hold and cherish and carry forth into our lives. I just love Margaret. I mean, there's something, and I'm just looking at that chair right where you are seated, which is where Andy and Margaret used to sit on Sundays. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but that's the place where they like to sit. And Margaret would sit next to Andy, and Andy would always take the end chair, and he would refuse to put on his hearing aids. Or if he did, he would turn them off. He wouldn't turn them on. So he couldn't hear all that was being said or, the music or whatever we were singing. So he was always a little, maybe a half step behind. And especially when I would share a joke and everybody would laugh, and he would be trying to understand the punchline. So he would just, not realizing that he was loud, he would go, "What? What did he say?" And then Margaret, with this horrified expression on her face, would turn to him and go, "Shush, Andy." And he'd go, "I didn't hear." And she'd go, "Shush." And then she would look at me and then she would mouth, "I'm sorry." So, it was, they came to church every Sunday. Unitarian Universalists sometimes approach religion as a pastime. We do, see it as another option among things and don't necessarily, especially because, we don't sell that somehow your soul is at stake if you don't show up on a Sunday. So it's not a requirement. nor is it an intentional spiritual practice. I'm sorry, I'm kind of complaining about people now. But I say that because Andy and Margaret, it was a practice, something that they devoted their lives to, and came up until the pandemic. They showed up every Sunday and were right here. Devoted, staunch, loyal members of this congregation who supported and sustained this place for what it is today. And that is a gratitude I will carry for who they were and what they meant to this community. See, when someone we love dies, someone who has lived a good life, someone who has made an impact on her family, on her friends, on her community, someone whose life was intertwined with our own, when someone we love dies, we are faced with that balance of deep loss and deep appreciation for their life, of holding on to lessons, to memories, to voices and faces, and letting go of the daily assurance of their presence, the wisdom of her counsel, the warmth of her embrace, the taste of her orange cake. My God, I never got to taste that. Ooh, just how do we reconcile these conflicting emotions of gratitude for being a part of Margaret's world and the pain of no longer having her in our world? In Tuesdays with Maury by Mitch Albom, Maury says, as long as we can love each other and remember the feeling of love we had, we can die without ever really going away. All the love you create is still there. All the memories are still there. You live on in the hearts of everyone you have touched and nurtured while you were here. Death ends a life, not a relationship. So I say to you, Phil, Stacy, Stuart, Belen, Keith, Nick, Justin, Paul, Derek, Nick, Kara, and Juliet, the relationship you had with Margaret, your mother, your grandmother, is still alive in each of you. The pieces of her that are imprinted on you remain. The love and the laughter, the cheerleading and the push for you to embrace and live life, the food and the wonderful stories, this and so much more are still a part of who you are. So continue to tend to those relationships. Continue to gather as family, as she would, and as a community of friends in twos or more, and tell your Margaret stories. Share your Margaret lessons and tell your friends. This is part of the meaning of eternal life. This is what immortality is, at least for us Unitarian Universalists. Margaret has risen today and lives yet in all of you. You see her face and you feel her spirit. What she animates in you touches all. And all the love we create is still there. All the memories are still there. Margaret lives on in the hearts of everyone she touched and nurtured while she was here. My colleague Greg Ward asserts, one thing is certain, no one, not one of us entering this world can escape the cost of living. The price we pay is this. To live in this world, we must accept that someday we will have to die. To love what is alive, we must accept having to lose what we have made precious through our care. To be fully and fiercely human, we must accept having to be breakable and sometimes broken. So when we stop to notice how Margaret's life gave us a path and a little light to see by, it encourages us to help carry that light forward. Through each of us, we carry forth in this world a small flame, and we know that the ability of that light to brighten the world depends upon the many others who learn to walk with it in their hearts. You are all, we are all Margaret's light bearers, the vessels of her joy, the holders of her eternal memory. So let us go forth with gratitude and thanksgiving, giving thanks for every gift Margaret gave us that brought us joy, peace, and strength of heart. Let us give thanks for her love that centered the love of her family. Let us remember that it is because we knew, loved, and delighted in Margaret that we feel such a sorrow for her death. But our joy came first. And let us depart remembering that we are all connected and our strength is the strength of the many. Though death may have severed the physical cord, our memories and love for Margaret remain strong. We thank you, Margaret, for your years with us in this world and for allowing us to share life's journey with you and to know you as a real person. We thank you for being the blessing that you were. May your memory be a blessing. Let me close with this poem, Beannacht, from the Irish poet John O'Donoghue, which is addressed as a blessing for his mother, Josie. Now, Beannacht means goodbye in Irish. On the day when the weight deadens on your shoulders and you stumble, may the clay dance to balance you. And when your eyes freeze behind the gray window and the ghost of loss gets into you, may a flock of colors, indigo, red, green, and azure blue, come to awaken in you a meadow of delight. When the canvas frays in the curg of thought and a stain of ocean blackens beneath you, may there come across the waters a path of yellow moonlight to bring you safely home. May the nourishment of the earth be yours. May the clarity of light be yours. May the fluency of the ocean be yours. May the protection of the ancestors be yours. And so may a slow wind work these words of love around you, an invisible cloak to mind your life. May it be so. Amen. Blessed be. Thank you all for coming together to celebrate Margaret, her life, her legacy of service and love. After the postlude, we will gather for a memorial reception in the library, which is to the back, and continue to tell our Margaret stories around some wonderful refreshments that the Alliance, an organization and a community that she loved, have provided for us. Thank you.